Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 1:14 p.m. on the 9th of June 2025, Monday, beginning of the working week for most people, and for me, just another day on planet Hellscape that we call lovingly paradise. Yay! But it started out as a really beautiful morning. I almost put the birds outside. I'm glad I didn't because it's not raining, but it's bitterly cold and there's a real bit of wind blowing out there. So I'm glad I decided not to do that. Kept the boys inside today because it's actually quite cold. It says it's 19 degrees at the moment, but it feels colder, probably because of the wind chill factor. I put the heater on now, and I could go and put a cardigan on too, actually. But, well, winter's here. Winter is no longer coming. Winter has arrived with a flush. Anyway, I'm going to continue reading from Man, Myth and Magic. Actually, awkward. I made a video yesterday and it was quite a funny video with lots of segues. I talked a lot about Ozempic and how it's killing two of my favourite celebrities, and I'm not happy about it, and I'm not going to go into that rant again now because I expressed it all yesterday and now I'm kind of depleted. And I went into another rant about something else, and it was actually a very good quality video. But after posting it, fortunately I was the only viewer, I realised I'd repeated reading the two previous kind of chapters. So, well, they're not really chapters, but it was a repeat performance. I thought it seemed like I was reading it again, but I got confused because the other one, the last one I did, wouldn't upload, so then I thought I went back in time. I slipped in the time stream. It's very weird. So I thought, well, there's no sense having two videos reading the same exact thing up. That's just mad. So I deleted it. And I'm going in again to start from the chapters that got deleted because YouTube wouldn't upload it for whatever mad reason, whether it was a glitch or whether they didn't like my colourful language or what was going on, I don't know. Had no trouble uploading. Actually, wait a minute. Wait just a minute here. No, I had no trouble uploading yesterday, but I self-deleted it because it was a repeat performance. You can't have repetitive performances, people. It's just it's like being stuck in a hell loop, isn't it? Dancing as fast as you can in a small corner of hell, repeating, ad nauseum, like the same mistakes that keep happening with my love life. We won't think about that because it's insane making and it's evil and it's sadistic and cruel, so we'll move on from that, shall we? Been moving on from that bullshit for 60 years. But anyway, let us continue reading. Mama doesn't do staying in the same corner of hell, treading water, not for very long, you know. She's been known to push herself off her own timeline before. Wasn't supposed to come back from that, quite frankly, but here we are, still pedaling as fast as we can. I mean, it's kind of comical when you think about it. From, when you zoom out from the great expanse of time, space and dimensions, it becomes comical. Just for a moment, I have finally had a parcel arrived. I've been waiting for that thing for 9 days. I was starting to get quite angry about it. I was going to write to the people I bought from and say, what twisted game are your delivery people playing? Not that they're responsible for that. but it was getting a bit twisted because they kept saying to me every day for the last 3 days, out for delivery but delayed, out for delivery but delayed, and it just didn't make sense. But I just saw him drop it off. I know it'll be that parcel because I've been waiting for it. So one moment, Mama T's on a mission. I'll be back from outer space with that look upon my face. Let's go, Catchy. Let's go, go, go. Let's go, go, go. I'm rethinking buying any more from that company because their delivery just takes too long. It's meant to be in New Zealand, but it comes from China. But I've had products come from China that only took 3-4 days. And for some reason, this delivery system of this company just can take up to 2 weeks. It's literally 10 days today. It's like, I guess that's about average, but you know, if I buy from, I've bought from a jewellery supplier in America, got here in 3-4 days. I bought something one time from India. I was shocked how quickly it got here. It got here in like 2 days from India. I don't know how that was even humanly possible. They must have some branch holding stock in a warehouse somewhere more local than India. So I'm trying to work out what's happening with our courier and delivery systems. It feels like sometimes they deliberately withhold things, like that thing, that little parcel. 3 days it's been saying that it's coming today, coming today, coming today, building anticipation like a fucking, you know, catharsis reaching for a full expression of some orgasmic release, and now it's here, I'm just here, blah, blah. Make me wait too long and get pissed off. Like that. I'm a bit like that. It's like, oh, you made me wait, but you built too much anticipation. Now I'm out of here. It's like I can't stand being tormented or tortured emotionally. It's like not playing that game. So as a consequence, I really like the products. It's a makeup company. I won't name who it is, but I really like their products. But they're hellishly expensive, and this is twice now I've been jerked around with deliveries, so I think I'll just buy local. It's probably better for the economy and environment to buy local anyway. And then I don't have to deal with this ignoble, stress-inducing nonsense. Really, Mama T's not a happy customer. But there's some things that are out of companies' control, like when delivery companies play these weird bullshit tracking games. I don't know what that was even about. It actually started out with another delivery company and ended up with someone else. It's like, what? I don't get it. Anyway, at the end of the day, I've got my product that I ordered, and all's well that ends well, is it not? Moving right along. Right, where was I? Oh yes, telling you that I'm going to read to you now from Man, Myth and Magic. And it's going to feel very repetitive to me because I've actually made this video before, but as I said, wouldn't upload, so I have to redo it. So here we go. Let's take a breath. Deep breath. Are you ready, people of Earth? Here we go. Art, magic, of the moderns. And here we have a painting by Salvador Dali. Who had a brilliant mind, and I would have minded sitting across in a cafe having a conversation with them. I'm actually starved for sitting with people with brilliant minds, with stimulating conversations that are intellectual and or spiritual and life affirming and soul nourishing and interesting. I live in a very limited world where I'm just superficial and isolated, and I miss intellectual bantering and stimulating conversations. I guess if I did a little course at university, I'd be exposed to people like that again, but they don't always like me, think I'm too dumb. You know how it is. What can you do? It's all relative in the broad scheme of things. It's like waiting for a parcel that almost never comes. Anyway, that painting that I just showed you is called Metamorphosis of Narcissus, the beautiful youth of Greek mythology who fell in love with his own reflection in a pool. He turned into the narcissus flower, which is hatching from the egg in the painting in the Tate Gallery by permission of the Edward James Foundation. There it is there. Sort of kind of daffodil really. And here we have some very lean, hungry hound eating some kind of carrion, or what is eating actually? Well, anyway, here we have a statue looking very svelte. And here we have a whole group of people also looking very emaciated. And here we have, what do we have here? Oh, that was the dog I showed you already. Here we have Narcissus, unable to extricate himself from his own image of himself, which ended badly, as it always does with narcissists. They turn on themselves ultimately. When they run out of victims, or their victims awaken to who they truly are. Not so much fun there for anyone really. Some kind of weird, dismembered kind of entity there. It looks like a rock, but when you look at it more carefully, it's a face and what looks like bones. Anyway, interesting imagery, Salvador Dali. Magic of the moderns. 100 years ago, the artistic ideal was truth to nature. Since then, many artists have substituted truth to the supernatural, the attempt to express the mysterious, mystical, and macabre. The urge to express a sense of the mysterious, the marvellous, the irrational, of all that is other than natural or normally to be seen, has produced many remarkable works of visual art since the later years of the last century. Reaction had grown by then against the prevailing realism in art and the materialist view of the world. The course of the pre-Raphaelite movement in England shows this very clearly. The realistic aim of being true to nature, which marked the movement's triumph in the 1850s, had lost its inspiring value 30 years later. It's amazing how things can shift, like swallow murmurations, fashions even in culture and art. Fascinating. That's why it's very good spiritual advice, like when the COVID epoch comes along, to just wait, Emery Higgins, just you wait. But people jumped in rather impatiently out of fear and brainwashing programming. If you'd waited, you could have had an entirely different outcome. But I'm not, I'm not putting shit on people that didn't know any better. I'm just saying, waiting, patience is one of the greatest virtues. So she got pissed off and impatient about a little parcel, but that's because of the Psy operation. Games I kept playing. It's delayed, it's delayed. It's been in Brisbane for 3 feckin' days. How can it be delayed? Don't know. So there's patience, and then there's dealing with incompetency or some kind of mischief, which grinds my gears. Incompetency can be forgiven. I'm the queen of incompetency. But deliberate malfeasances and mischief and undermining of things, naughty, naughty, very naughty. Right. The mystic and fanciful element later came uppermost in the work of Edward Burne-Jones and his followers. On the continent of Europe, the dominance of truth to nature was opposed in various ways. One contrast was the ideal conceived by Puvis de Chavannes in his serene and timeless mural paintings. I'll have to Google him later. I actually have no idea who he is, nor do I even know what his paintings look like. I have to admit when I don't know things. It's called having integrity. Awkward though it may be. But there are, let me Google it while we're here, because it's going to grind my gears. It's funny, it didn't bother me when I read this to you in the last video that I wouldn't upload. It's funny how sometimes things bother me and sometimes they don't. It's very odd. I guess it depends on how awake and alert I'm feeling and whether I decide I care or not. Right. Pierre Puvis de Chavannes, French painter, with a photograph of him. Right. Well, these must be his artworks. No, I've never seen his works before. Well, there you go. Spank me ass and call me Judy. Well, my name's Tanya. So there is that. Well, at least now we know who's being referenced here. I don't like referencing something I have no idea what I'm talking about or reading about or subscribing to. Anyway, I'll leave you to Google him yourself later and have a good look at his workmanship, his art, in your own time, at your own pace. I just wanted to keep abreast of the situation, what I'm actually talking about here. Well, I'm not talking about it, but what I'm representing to you through reading from this fabulous book. But there are other artists who valued the diabolic and the macabre. Gustave Moreau was praised for the satanic beauty of his The Apparition. Right, we'll have a quick glimpse at that too while we're at it. Now, how do I do that? Right. the apparition. Let's just come up with movies. Alright, we'll have to put in his title. Gustav. Is it Muro or Moro? Can't see. Moro. Moro. Let's see what they come up with. Aha. So watercolour, painted between 1874 and 1876, showing Salome dancing. Ah, but we can't see because we've got the bloody glare from the window. How do we stop the glare from the window? We draw the curtains, which I can't quite reach. Right, is that better? Sort of, kind of. Well, anyway, again, you can Google at your own leisure if you want to. Good look at Gustav Moreau's The Apparition. A painting in which the head of John the Baptist appears in a blaze of ghostly light to Salome as she dances lasciviously before Herod. Girl's got to do what a girl's got to do. Sometimes in history and mythology and in art and in feminine mystique and in wildness and in her own power. Ooh, that set the cat among the pigeons, boys. Wow. What was her dance called? The Dance of the Seven Veils, I believe it was. I think. Or was that some other famous historical dancer? Let's Google it. Got to be right. Can't be spreading misinformation. Dance of the Seven Veils. There's a famous dance scene, most notably known from Richard Strauss's opera Salome. It's a dance performed by the character Salome for her stepfather King Herod to seduce him and ultimately obtain her desired reward, the head of John the Baptist. The dance is a metaphorical act where Salome unveils herself and, by extension, her intentions to Herod. It also became widely known through Oscar Wilde's 1893 play Salome, which was then translated into English in 1894. Well, there you go. So Mama T's not quite so stupid after all. I did have the right connection to the right character. Yay! Right, here we go. We continue on. Literature and painting found kinship in this pursuit of strange sensation. Moreau's painting inspired Oscar Wilde to write his dramatic prose poem Salome. The satanic and erotic character that Felician Rops gave to his etchings had admirers in Baudelaire and Huysmans. The strange visions inspired by Edgar Allan Poe and Baudelaire's Fleurs du Mal, which is French for bad flowers, in the lithographs of Odilon Redon are described with gusto by Huysmans in that decadent masterpiece, his novel Al Rebord, as being beyond anything imaginable and showing a fantasy that was unique. The influential graphic art of Aubrey Beardsley added a wittily satanic twist to a style originally based on Burne-Jones's chaste designs. All these artists contributed to what may be called the spirit of the 1890s. The search for new sensations, the fascination found in the lilies and languors of vice, a leaning towards the mystic and occult, as well as purely technical departures, were ingredients to be found in varied proportion. The salons of the Rose and Croix, which is Rosicrucians, which ran from 1892 to 1897 under the directorship of the critic and novelist Josephine Paladin, whose aim was to ruin realism, were full of mystically religious works in imitation of Burne-Jones, Murray, and Puvis. The painter as magus. Symbolism was a key word of the period in France. It was an idea evolved in the circle of Paul Gauguin at Pont-Aven in Brittany. The purpose was to give visual form to ideas instead of an objective view of natural appearances. A more active theorist than Gauguin was Émile Bernard, who, besides working with him in Brittany, exhibited religious works in the Rosicrucian Salon. A separate group, the Nabi, included artists who worked in the mood created in Brittany, of special note being Paul Sérusier and Maurice Denis. In each of these related groups, there was the thought that the artist had an inspired role. It was the function of the painter in the view of Paladin to be a magus, one not merely wise, but entrusted with a special mission. The Nabi, who took their name from the Hebrew word Na'abi'im, meaning divinely inspired, invented titles and orders for themselves like an occult sect. Gauguin can be viewed, like the other great post-impressionists, Paul Cézanne and Vincent van Gogh, as one who enriched the language of form and colour. But he was distinct from them, as one who dreamed of a golden age, a fabulous primeval world to which he longed to return. All things primitive, as in some way giving evidence of this mythic past, stirred him. The peasant life and costume of Brittany, the rough religious carvings and crucifixes of the region gave hints of what he sought. The colonial section of the Paris exhibition of 1889 opened his eyes to the existence of more exotic and mysterious lands. In the glowing text of a handbook on Tahiti, he found the promise of an earthly paradise. It is possible to regard the pictures painted by Gauguin in Tahiti and the Marquesas Islands simply as superb renderings of native types in tropical landscapes, and to relate them aesthetically to the classic and decorative manner of Puvis de Chavannes. Yet many of them also show his interest in native religion and mythology, and how he introduced symbols of his own to represent them. He found fragmentary accounts of Tahitian lore in writings by earlier French travellers. In the absence of Tahitian representations of their gods, he made up images to personify them, which is not really a good practice, people of Earth, lest one offend the Tahitian gods. Just saying. His description of how he came to paint the famous Manau Tupapau is enlightening. A young girl lies on a couch in fear. He imagines she is frightened of the Tupapau, spirit of the dead, the constant dread of the Tahitians. What, asks Gauguin, can be a Tahitian's idea of a ghost? Naturally, he answers, she thinks of someone she has already seen. Therefore, my ghost, my spirit, must be some sort of an old woman. Bit of projection going on there, I might add. The flowers in the background, he adds, are Tupapau's flowers, phosphorescences, and a sign that the spirit has you in mind. It is true that the Cubists and other artists in the first decade of the 20th century were attracted by the ceremonial masks, carved idols and fetish figures of Africa, but they separated their qualities as sculpture from the notions of the supernatural which they stood for. What the European artists studied was the directness of technique, the sharply cut planes, and concentration of the essentials of plastic form. The delirium of Dada. There was a reasoned sequence in the development of means in modern art until during the 1914 to 1918 war there came the extraordinary revolt against all reason of a movement called Dada. It started with a group of poets and painters who took refuge in the quiet centre of the hurricane of European conflict at Zurich, in neutral Switzerland. In these individuals, the 1914 to 1918 war was the cause of extraordinary behaviour bordering on frenzy. Bitterly opposed to the deadly struggle, they dissociated themselves from ordinary society and all its works and beliefs and conventions. They were complete anarchists. They were anti-everything, including art itself, which they linked with other expressions of society as a repository of false beliefs and conventions. The name Dada is said to have been the result of opening a German-French dictionary at random and lighting upon the word meaning hobby horse. It has been suggested alternatively that it was taken from Da, the Russian for yes of the Slav refugees in Zurich. Either way, it was meaningless and as such delighted the wild poets and artists who took a prominent part in the movement. The Romanian Tristan Tzara, the Germans Hugo Ball and Richard Hülsenbeck, the Alsatian Hans Jean Arp. What we call Dada is foolery extracted from the emptiness in which all the higher problems are wrapped. A gladiator's gesture, a public execution of false morality, said Hugo Ball. Ball in English. Anyway, Dada in action stemmed from performances at the Cabaret Voltaire in Zurich, which included the chanting of nonsense poems accompanied by noise music made by drums, cowbells and whistles, interspersed with screams. Sounds very Burkean, doesn't it? It was found that the Negro types of mask devised by Romanian artist Marcel Iancu created in the wearer an irresistible desire for outlandish movement. Ecstatic dance comes to mind. They represented not human beings but characters and emotions that are larger than life. The paralysing horror which is the backcloth of our age is here made visible, said Hugo Ball. Dada's defiant manifesto, mechanical noise, freakish typography, the simultaneous representation of unlike images involved with one another, derived from futurism. Collage, works fashioned out of all sorts of different materials stuck together, came from Cubism. But what element of the supernatural was there in all this? It might be said that the Dadaists in their public demonstrations whipped up something that approximated to the delirium of primitive tribal ceremonies. Did they envisage anything beyond? The answer may be found, and was found, by exponents of Dada in chance. Chance was their magic. When Jean Arp tore up a drawing and let the pieces flutter to the ground, he discovered that they fell into an arrangement that seemed to have a strange rightness of its own. It could be imagined that some unknown law operated, as unfathomable to us, he said, as the depths from which all life arises. Exploration of the unconscious. The unconscious mind, the mysterious inner presence that Freud had discovered, was an operative factor on which Dada relied. Release from consciously directed and rational processes produced a kind of ecstatic activity, a self-hypnotism in which anything was possible. The found object and the ready-made were discoveries initiated by the French intellectual Marcel Duchamp. The implication was that any object, whether natural, a twisted tree root or oddly shaped stone, for instance, or some commonplace man-made article, became magically invested with significance if the observer chose to look at it in that way. He might be said to have invented it. Duchamp was uncompromisingly and contemptuously anti-art. This was expressed in the notorious ready-made called The Fountain, a urinal, which he signed R. Mutt, the name of a firm of sanitary engineers, and sent to a New York exhibition to shock an art-worshipping public. It is a comment on the public's capacity for reverence that when the shock had worn off, the fountain was many times a feature of exhibitions, and that replicas of such ready-mades as a bicycle wheel mounted on a stool have been sold in art galleries in limited editions as modern masterpieces. Exclamation mark. Just try and find. I haven't put a title, I haven't put a blurb about the picture associated with this. But I'll finish reading before I show you the picture and make my wry little comment. Just the same wry little comment that I made in the other video that I had to delete because it wouldn't upload. Blah. Anyway, on Duchamp's part it was an ironic jest. He took trouble to disclaim any aesthetic pleasure in his choice, yet it was a gesture that made a deep impression. For others it was a way of seeing that once again filled the world with wonders. A urinal named Mutt. Whatever floats your boat, I guess. Perhaps some memory even stirred of the spirit in which primitive men attributed superstitious meaning and powers to things seen. The found object was not a passing fancy or joke quickly forgotten, but an active ingredient in the movement that superseded but also came out of Dada. Surrealism. The surrealist shock. The word surrealist was first used by the poet and propagandist of Cubism Guillaume Apollinaire in 1917. He described his burlesque play, Les Mamelles de Tiresias, as a surrealist drama. Earlier, the word surnaturalism had been used by Baudelaire to suggest that the aim of art should be to create a suggestive magic, an enchantment. Supernaturalism was another term used by poets. Heinrich Heine had declared himself a supernaturalist in art, believing that the artist cannot find all his types in nature, but that the most remarkable ones are revealed to him in his soul. I kind of agree with that. For Victor Hugo, the surnaturel and supernatural were ideas comprised in nature, referring to that part of nature we do not perceive. These trains of thought do not necessarily conflict with one another or with the surrealism that began to emerge in the 1920s. The unconscious mind was the part of nature we do not perceive, which poets and painters set themselves to explore. Surrealism, in the definition of André Breton in 1924, was pure psychic automatism. Thought dictated in the absence of all control exerted by reason and outside all aesthetic or moral preoccupations. The supernatural had a new and fascinating psychological location. The relation with Dada is close. The Surrealists used similar shock tactics, were equally against art, that is, against works which they considered failed to express truth of feeling. Yes, I see that too. Art should inspire some kind of raw emotion, potency in the viewer. Some of the same artists, Art and Max Ernst, for instance, figure in the history of both movements. But Surrealism was a more organised revolt and a more constructive effort to exploit the workings of instinct, intuition, and states of being, as in dreams, when the conscious reason is temporarily suspended. Right, now I'm going to read the two little blurb, tiny little entries at the bottom that come after Asmodeus, which I will read shortly, but there's a reason why I want to read these first, because I find it very amusing how the editor has cobbled this book together with tiny little in-jokes that you have to kind of be a bit perceptive. I noticed it in the other preceding chapter too, but I didn't speak out about it, which I should have, because it's just like a little bit of a puzzle, a little bit of something to be alert to hidden in the book. Kind of amuses me anyway. Ass, or ass, depending on your pronunciation. Often a symbol of stupidity and sometimes of lust, in Christian symbolism, it stands for humble patience and courage. Some classical writers accused the Jews and the early Christians of worshipping an ass. And then the little blurb next to it is Assyria, also starting the first three letters of ass. Empire in modern Mesopotamia, which reached its peak of dominance in the Middle East in the 8th and 7th centuries BC, named from its chief town and god, Ashur, see Mesopotamia. And I'll show you the little photographs and paintings. So here we have an example of Dadaist or perhaps Surrealist painting. It doesn't say who the title or who the artist is, but looks very Darwin-esque if you ask me, but it could be one of those other artists mentioned. And clearly it's a very large ass with a face bent down, with teeth and lipstick, looking quite sinister actually. But it's definitely bum cheeks of some kind. Let me just try and get my camera to focus. And I was greatly amused by the little in-joke, because here they teamed it up with ass, and we have a picture of the Mother Mary and sweet little baby Jesus riding on an ass, which according to the story they rode a donkey from Bethlehem, or to Bethlehem from Nazareth, I think it was. Anyway, and then we have Assyria, and again it's some kind of head of some kind of god, but attached to some kind of animal. So I just wanted to share that little in-joke with you. I'll be back momentarily. I have to excuse myself, but I'll be back momentarily. So hold the line, people of Earth. Right, sorry for that interruption. Anyway, these things happen, people. These things happen. Right, the next entry is Asmodeus. And here's a picture of him. Asmodeus, originally a demon of rage, turned into a spirit of lust, whom the magician must summon bareheaded as a mark of respect. From Francis Barrett's Magus, 1801. I'm trying to work out why they didn't put a title on that picture of that weird creature showing its arse. Not my monkey, not my circus. Just grinds my gears slightly, but you know, nothing is always perfect. I forget things too. Asmodeus. The demon of lust was probably originally the Persian fiend of the wounding spear, Aishma Daiva, from a root, Aish, meaning to rush forward or violent movement. He was a storm spirit and a personification of rage, who filled men's hearts with anger and desire for revenge. Anger was regarded in the ancient world as something preeminently evil, stirred up like the violence of thunder and lightning by powerful supernatural forces. Imported from Persia into Palestine, Asmodeus or Ashmedai appears frequently in Jewish literature, where his original function was to cause frustration in marriage, probably in order to provoke rage and violence. In the book of Tobit, written circa 250 BC, Tobias marries Sarah, who has had 7 husbands before, but all of them have been strangled by Asmodeus to prevent them from lying with her. On the advice of the angel Raphael, Tobias burns the heart and liver of a fish, and the smoke drives the demon away. No explanation of the effectiveness of the fish smoke is given, though it was evidently an unusually fierce and voracious fish, as it had earlier jumped at Tobias and attempted to devour him while he was washing himself in the river Tigris. Sounds like a shark of some kind, doesn't it? Maybe a lamprey or some other large hideous fish. I wasn't there, trying to picture it in my mind, you understand. The Latin version of Tobit adds that Tobias and Sarah had also defeated the demon by remaining chaste for the first 3 nights of their marriage, which was the foundation of the later custom of the Tobias nights. Down to the 19th century in parts of France, Germany and the Balkans, it was the custom to follow the example of Tobias and Sarah. In medieval France, husbands sometimes paid a fee to the church for a license to disregard the rule. According to Jewish stories, Asmodeus was the son of a mortal woman Na'amah, either by one of the fallen angels or by Adam before the creation of Eve. In the Testament of Solomon, written between 100 and 400 AD, he says, I was born of angel's seed by a daughter of man. Described as furious and shouting, he not only prevents intercourse between husband and wife, but also encourages adultery. My business, he says, is to plot against the newly married so that they may not know one another. I transport men into fits of madness and desire when they have wives of their own, so that they leave them and go off by night and day to others that belong to other men, with the result that they commit sin. In this way, the demon's functions extended from frustrating desire to arousing it. He developed into a supernatural power of lechery. It was said to have the feet of a cock, a bird noted for indiscriminate sexual vigour. What do they say in French? Le coq suprême? By that they mean the patriarchy, but same bird, different day. According to other Jewish tales, Asmodeus was the king of demons and lived on a mountaintop. He liked to go up to heaven every day to take part in learned discussions there. The master magician, King Solomon, forced Asmodeus and the other devils to build the temple at Jerusalem, but Asmodeus took his revenge when Solomon foolishly allowed him to seize the magic ring in which his power resided. Isn't that interesting? Sort of parallels the magic ring in Lord of the Rings. Solomon. Could be a coincidence though. Asmodeus promptly hurled the ring down to the bottom of the sea, sent Solomon into exile, and reigned in his place. But Solomon miraculously recovered the ring from the belly of a fish and imprisoned Asmodeus and the other demons in a large jar. Sounds like genies being trapped in an oil lamp, doesn't it? A magical textbook called the Lemegeton, which gives a long list of demons, says that when Asmodeus shows himself to human eyes, he rides a dragon, carries a spear, and has 3 heads of a ram, a bull, and a man, all traditionally lecherous creatures. 'Tis true. The magician must summon him bareheaded as a mark of respect. He can make the magician invisible and lead him to hidden treasure. Right, the next entry, which is quite a long one, is Astarte. The Queen of Heaven with crescent horns was a rival to the God of the Jews, noted for the sensuality of her worship. The great Semitic goddess Astarte eventually turned into the male demon Astaroth, who was said to have very bad breath. From Colin de Plancy's Dictionnaire Infernal, 1863. Here she is, riding what looks like a giant bat, holding a serpent in her very taloned hand. She's got her own little wings on the back of her, on her back. She's flat-chested, very androgynous looking, quite frankly. And then there's a giant horn at the back. Some kind of weird tail at the back of the bat. Can't quite work that one out, baby boys and baby girls, but never mind. Gives you an idea. Interesting. A great mother goddess, Astarte, was worshipped under various names throughout the Middle East as Ishtar in Mesopotamia, as Ashtat or Asherah by the Phoenicians and Canaanites. The Greeks called her Astarte and equated her with their own love goddess, Aphrodite, who was originally one of her many forms. Numerous clay plaques representing her have been found in Syria and Palestine, dating from 1700 to 1100 BC, and probably worn as charms to promote fertility. She is mentioned frequently and with violent disapproval in the Old Testament, and eventually, like many other deities who were rivals of the God of the Jews and Christians, she turned into a demon and is one of the fallen angels in Milton's Paradise Lost. Astoret, whom the Phoenicians called Astarte, Queen of Heaven, with crescent horns, to whose bright image nightly by the moon Sidonian virgins paid their vows and songs. W. F. Albright has remarked that goddesses of fertility play a much greater role among the Canaanites than they do among any other ancient people, evidently because of their dread of drought and famine. Though these goddesses had different names and were independent personalities, they had similar functions and were essentially the same goddess. They ruled war as well as fertility, motherhood, and sex. And they were frequently represented naked and with the sexual organs emphasized. The Bride of Heaven. Ashtat was the chief goddess of the Phoenicians at Tyre and Sidon, and wherever they established colonies, they took her with them. She had a temple in their colony at Memphis in Egypt, for instance, and temples at Carthage. A Phoenician statuette of her in alabaster has been found at Galera near Granada in Spain. She sits on a throne flanked by sphinxes and with a bowl under her breasts. At some point in her ritual, milk was poured into the head of the statuette and flowed into the bowl through holes pierced in the goddess's breasts. Asherah or Asherat, often called Asherat of the sea, was the wife of the Canaanite supreme god El, whose name simply means the god, and by him was the mother of 70 deities. The same goddess was also worshipped in the south of Arabia and by the Amorites, the Semitic nomads, who by 2000 BC had spread northwards from Arabia into Palestine, Syria, and Mesopotamia. There is an Amorite inscription to her of the 18th century BC, in which she is called the Bride of Heaven. In the Ugaritic texts, dating from circa 1400 BC, found at Ras Shamra in northern Syria since 1929, the goddess Anat plays a leading role. The chief god El stays in the background, and the most active god is Baal, the storm god, who sends the rains which bring fertility to the earth. Anat is his sister and wife, and she plays the vital part in killing the god of drought and sterility, or, in other words, in reviving the life of nature. See Baal. Asherah, the wife of the old supreme god El and the mother of Baal, seems to have been hostile to Baal at first, but later joined forces with Anat to help him. Apparently, the followers of both goddesses tried to attach them to the fertility god as the cult of Baal developed. All these goddesses were imported into Egypt, and in the 13th century BC, Pharaoh Ramses II called himself the companion of Anat. Ashtat or Asherah appears in an Egyptian sculpture where she is called Kodshu or Kedeshat, the sacred prostitute. She is naked, stands on a lion, and holds a lotus flower, the symbol of life, in her right hand. In her left hand, the goddess holds a pair of serpents, which are symbols of life renewed, because snakes slough their old skins each year. I wonder if Sybil's going to come back. She arrived on 31st of October, Halloween last year. I wonder if she's going to come back and hang out with me for 12 days while she sheds her skin again. I have a sense that she felt safe here at Sacred Space and deliberately chose me. I know it sounds a bit mad, but she'd been around in previous times. I just hadn't realised it was the same serpent. Anyway, sweet. I'm okay if she comes back, as long as, she doesn't eat my new little birdies or bite me or anything weird like that. She was a very good flatmate, just kept very quiet and kept very still most of the time, moving in and out of the sun each day, the warmth I suppose, and maybe hoping to try and get the skin to break off. Oh, it was a very painful process. I could see she was struggling actually. Sweet little thing. Sweet, very large thing as the case may be. In Canaan, the symbol of Asherah was a wooden pole called an Asherah. It might be a living tree, but was more often a tree trunk with the branches lopped off, standing in a socket on a stone base. You can hear Kermie singing in the back room. The upright pole is again a symbol of life, generation and fertilizing power, and may be the tree of life, which appears frequently in Canaanite art. The abomination of the Sidonians. When the Israelites invaded Palestine, they found numerous local fertility gods and goddesses established, Baals, and Ashtarts or Asherahs. The Old Testament writers called the goddess Ashtoreth, combining her name with the Hebrew word for shame, boshet, as a comment on the licentiousness of her rites. But many Jews worshipped her. They forsook the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They went after other gods from among the gods of the peoples who were round about them, and bowed down to them. When Gideon pulled down his father's altar of Baal and cut down the Asherah which stood beside it, he was too afraid of his family and the men of the town to do it by day, and he did it by night. Judges chapters 2 and 6. Happy bird. It was natural to feel that the gods already established in the country were powerful there, and the worship of a fertility goddess appealed to Jewish farmers who were just as concerned for the increase of their herds, crops and families as the Canaanites were. In spite of the efforts of the prophets, many Jews continued to worship the mother. In the 10th century BC, King Solomon built a high place or sanctuary on the right hand of the mountain of corruption for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Sidonians. 2 Kings chapter 23. In the 9th century at Mizpah, north of Jerusalem, temples of Yahweh and Asherah stood side by side. King Ahab and his wife, the notorious Jezebel, were devoted to the Canaanite gods and maintained 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. It was against these priests that Elijah fought his great ritual battle on Mount Carmel, 1 Kings chapter 18. He succeeded in calling down fire from heaven when they could not, but the reaction against him was so strong had he fled for his life. In the late 7th century BC, the prophet Jeremiah still bewailed that the children gather wood, the fathers kindle fire, and the women knead dough to make cakes for the Queen of Heaven. But those he reproached answered that they would continue to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven and pour libations to her, as they and their fathers had done, because attempts to suppress her worship had brought nothing but disaster. You should show loyalty and respect to the gods of your land that you reside upon, people of earth. They are ancient and spirits of that land, that particular place and culture throughout time. Jeremiah chapters 7 and 44. It's not to say, as a Jew speaking here, that you should forsake the Holy One and all manifestations of holiness, Supreme Being, the Creator, but you should show respect to the gods of the land upon which you reside. Ancient and earth nurturing that they are. And if you invoke their wrath, you bring disaster upon the land and your people. Just saying. Priests and prostitutes. As goddess of fertility, Astarte typified the reproductive powers of nature and woman. She was associated with the moon and often shown with the horns of the crescent moon. Because the moon was believed to govern the growth, decay and rebirth of all things as it waxed and waned in the sky, see moon. The dove, an amorous bird, indeed they are, horny little buggers, belonged to her, and at Ascalon in the 1st century AD, a visitor saw an impossible number of doves in the streets and houses because they were sacred and no one ever killed them. Fishes were sacred to her also, perhaps for their numerous offspring. I'm laughing because I have 2 goldfish remaining in my front pond and 2 little birdies gifted to me a few weeks back, and wow, always symbols of fertility at this house, even though I myself have been deprived of my own fertility and grieve over the stolen fertility from my adult daughters due to the COVID epoch. But the gods still bless me accordingly with life in all manifestations of fecundity. Although these 2 birdies are male, so I don't have to worry about them dying while laying eggs like what happened to my beautiful Charlie. So I guess the male principle has nestled down upon sacred space as opposed to the female principle. Well, it is what it is. Yes, my little Kermie. The Jewish prophets condemned the worship of Astarte, not only because they believed that Yahweh was the one true God, but also because of the sexual rituals of the goddess, who was served by sacred prostitutes. Their activities had a practical use, for their earnings financed the goddess's cult, but the sexuality of Astarte's worship was basically imitative magic intended to sustain the fertility of nature. Greek and Roman writers were also repelled by the worship of the Middle Eastern goddesses, whose rituals spread westwards, with their phallic symbols, sacred prostitutes, and painted priests in women's clothes. In The Golden Ass, Apuleius, born circa 123 AD, describes the priests, their faces daubed with rouge and their eye sockets painted to bring out the brightness of their eyes, who carried the image of the Syrian goddess about on an ass, dancing to the sound of castanets and cymbals, cutting themselves with knives and flagellating themselves for the edification of the spectators before going round with the collecting box. Earlier, in the biblical account of the contest between Elijah and the prophets of Baal, the Canaanite god's priests were said to cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances until the blood gushed out upon them. Lake of Holy Fishes. The travelling lecturer and humorist Lucian, a contemporary of Apuleius, wrote an essay about the Astarte of Hierapolis, northwest of Aleppo in Syria. Tame bulls, bears, lions and eagles were kept in the grounds of the temple, and there was a lake full of holy fishes, some of which knew their names and came when called. In the early summer there was a great festival of the goddess, when trees were brought and erected outside the temple with goats, sheep, and objects of gold and silver hung on them. The sacred idols were carried about among the trees and then burned. The temple attendants were eunuchs who wore white robes with pointed caps. They cut their arms till the blood ran and bet each other. Sometimes a young man, carried away in the ecstasy of the goddess's worship, would devote himself to her service by castrating himself. Don't try that at home, boys. He would then run through the city, and the occupants of the house into which he threw his severed members would supply him with women's clothes. Astonishing, is it not? Princes of Amity. Amity means friendship, I believe. As a result of the denunciations of Ashtoreth in the Old Testament as an abomination and an enemy of God, Jews and Christians decided that she was a demon, but for unknown reasons. the goddess turned into a male demon with very bad breath. Reminds me of my brother-in-law, Jacques Cohen. Ooh, demon he is too. If he is summoned up by a magician, he appears in human form, half black and half white. He reveals all events of the past, present and future, and knows all secrets. In the magical textbooks, the demon Ashtaroth has lost all connection with sex, but in the early 17th century, Ashtaroth and Asmodeus were among the devils who possessed Madeleine de Demondot, as we read about in Aix-en-Provence nuns. Under their influence, or so it was believed, she danced and sang lewd songs, writhed in indecent postures, and told spine-chilling stories of orgies and cannibalism at which revels she had attended. In 1673, Madame de Montespan sacrificed children to Ashtaroth and Asmodeus, princes of amity, which is kind of odd since they're basically the same entity. In her attempt to secure her hold on Louis XIV's affections by black magic. Silly, silly woman. Further reading: John Gray, The Canaanites; Donald Hardin, The Phoenicians; E.O. James, The Ancient Gods; W.F. Albright, From the Stone Age to Christianity. Lucian's The Goddess of Syria is in Volume 4 of the Lerp edition of his works, though in an eccentric and tiresome translation. Above, the head and magical symbol of Astaroth from Francis Barrett's Magus. The goddess came to be considered a demon because the Old Testament prophets denounced the licentious rites with which she was worshipped. Here below is his sigil. I wouldn't bother invoking him though, even though it's tempting if you want to find hidden treasure, because more likely you'll just end up with a shyster and a schmuck like my brother-in-law of the foul breath and foul behaviours. Not a pleasant individual to deal with and not welcome at my sacred space, home, garden, or even mind, body and spirit. So we'll just purge that one. Ding! Foul it was. But anyway, carry on. Left, Astarte in alabaster, a Mesopotamian, Mesopotamia. I always struggle with that word. Statue of the goddess of love, circa 2000 BC. The crescent or horn-shaped headdress signifies her connection with the moon and with sexuality. And quite frankly, I actually think she looks quite lovely there. Although I don't fancy the idea of her whipping young men up into such ecstasy that they chop their own bollocks off and then throw their testes into a household which gives them female clothes in return. That's a bit of a bridge too far. Just saying. But, so you can kind of understand why the Jews and the Christians kind of freaked out about that. But was it just a one-off, or was that person just a bit mad? I mean, is she being maligned unnecessarily for some lunacy of some kind? One can never tell. Oh, I must say, let's have a good look at her again. As a jeweler, well, an aspiring silversmith, I'm kind of admiring her earrings. Maybe I should try and copy those one day. Not copy, but make something similar. And she seems to have gemstones for eyes. They look to me, there's a gemstone in her navel as well, which looked to me like some kind of carnelian, or the one in her navel's definitely carnelian. I think it's carnelian in her eyes too. Well, anyway, the goddess of love and fertility, blessed be, with harm to none, and competition with none, so it is done. Right. I'll read on a little bit more and then I will stop, I think, at astrology, which is quite a long chapter. And so I'll just read this next entry. Astral body. The experience of seeming to leave one's own body and look at it from outside is not uncommon. It usually happens briefly and involuntarily, but some people have deliberately experimented with astral travel. And I know myself that one time when I was dancing at Koala Tavern, which was over a year ago, I danced myself into such ecstasy and simultaneous exhaustion. That was before I started the CPAP therapy, so it was a bit intense if I danced too hard or too long. You know, oxygen deprived that I am most of the time, that it would send me into a kind of an altered state. But I actually remember vividly that I left my body and was flying all around that dance space in that venue. I had to kind of surreptitiously, quietly whistle myself back down, because I knew that I was both in my body dancing vigorously and wildly and joyously and ecstatically, but I was also conscious that another part of me was watching me dance, and watching the few people that were there, and watching, the musicians. That night alter egos were playing. So I became very conscious that I had dissociated from my own body and was in my astral form as well. It's a very unique and interesting experience, actually. I've never had that happen to me before while I was consciously awake and aware and actually dancing. Very powerful experience, but it had been a very unusual night that night. Going there, I think it was the first time I'd gone there too. There had been an altercation outside the tavern of 3 Aboriginal women, an old mother and a younger woman in her 40s and a younger woman in her 30s, which I refer to as mother, matron and maiden, although the younger woman was not really technically a maiden anymore, but it was kind of that symbology of matron, mother and maiden, mother and crow. waiting for me as I arrived and having this terrible fight about what a terrible mother the old mother was, and somehow brought into it trying to make peace between the three women, which was odd. Don't even know why I did that actually. It's odd, out of character of me. Don't usually buy into other people's business. And the woman, the middle, one in the middle, that was really distressed with her mother, turned to me and said, "You don't understand. I have a terrible mother." And I looked at her and I said, "I understand very well, my darling. I too had a terrible mother." And she threw herself into my arms and kissed my cheek and held me. And I was awestruck and humbled and kind of spiritually elevated, and then I had to go in and begin my dance. So I knew when I started that evening that it was going to be a very unusual evening, and indeed it was. But anyway, it wasn't a bad experience, it was just unusual and unique. Right, let me continue reading. For centuries it has been a common idea that man is made of two components, a soul or spirit which comes from God, and a material body of flesh and blood. But some philosophers and occult theorists have suggested that each man has a third component, an astral body, meaning literally starry body, sometimes called the body of light. I'm going to have to bloody excuse myself again. Not very well today. I don't know what's upset my gut, because all I had was eggs on toast for breakfast. It's a horrible thought. I hope those eggs weren't off. But anyway, we'll soldier on until I absolutely have to excuse myself. Awkward. I'm a real woman inhabiting this body with my astral body and my extra spirit gifted to me from all the near deaths. There's a lot going on inside this body, mind and spirit. I have to pull them all into perfect alignment sometimes, and Miss Five always rebels. Mama T tries to think she's in charge of everything, but she's in charge of nothing, because Miss Five, the eternal brat, but the pristine one, is actually running the show most of the time. So, I'm well integrated, don't get me wrong, but it can be a bit awkward when the spirits all want to go off and do their own thing, and I have to go and get back in here, girlfriends. Behave yourselves by the goddess. Anyway, I'm only half joking because it can be a bit like that sometimes. This astral body is an exact copy of the flesh and blood body, but is made of a finer material and has a shining and luminous appearance. It is supposed to be capable of separating itself from the physical body and travelling about, passing through walls, ceilings, and other solid obstructions. It is also said to survive death when it leaves the physical body. It exists in what is called the astral plane, which includes the normal everyday world but extends beyond it. I wrote about in my video yesterday, I read out to you how I felt my astral body reintegrating with my physical, and it was like slipping on a coat. It was a bit astonishing that I actually have sensations of that now as I age or creep closer towards my actual death, whichever comes first. but it's a fairly new manifestation that started. I've had it once or twice last year, so I think it started about last year. Can't remember when exactly, but it's a very trippy experience feeling yourself re-enter into your body upon waking and reintegrate. So I know I'm not imagining it because here we're describing it here in the literature. An amusing account of astral travel was given by the French Roman Catholic journalist and occultist Anne Osmont, who died in 1953. She described how, on her first attempt at astral travel, she succeeded in leaving behind physical evidence of what she had done. She was friendly with a husband and wife, both sculptors. The wife, who was called Annie, had one evening expressed her strong disbelief in the possibility of astral travel. Mademoiselle Osmont resolved to prove her wrong the same night. It took a full quarter of an hour of effort to project herself out of her physical body, and then, passing through the wall, she went to her friend's flat. They were asleep in bed. She took note of the colour and style of their nightclothes, but thought that was poor evidence, and looked around for some object to topple. On the mantelpiece was a gilt lacquer glass, and she tried to move it. It seemed as difficult to move as a piano, but presently she noticed it had moved a little, and continuing her efforts, she got it to the edge and over. It smashed on the floor. The couple sat up in bed with a start, and she heard Annie say grumpily, "I bet it's that imbecile Osmont." On her next ordinary visit, she first saw the husband and repeated Annie's words to him. He recognised the reference and told her that his wife was very angry, as the goblet had been a family heirloom. Mademoiselle Osmont records that she was desperately exhausted for several days as a result of this effort. Movement of physical objects while in the astral body is rare. The skinless hag. Among the magicians of the West Indies, the projection of the astral body is achieved by singing special charm songs. They speak of this accomplishment as hagging, and those of either sex who are feared as possessors of this power are hags. The operation, colloquially called changing the skin, is generally supposed to be performed after nightfall in a cool and unfrequented place. The hag strips naked, settles in a comfortable position, and begins to sing a song. At the end of the song, the body is left unconscious. The hag is said to be visible or invisible at will, or to take any appearance he or she chooses. According to the West Indians, the normal nighttime appearance of a skinless hag is an egg-shaped mass of faint light or fire. Sounds a bit like an orb, doesn't it? egg-shaped mass of faint light? Maybe. This light is said to be similar to the glow of decaying fish or rotten wood seen in the dark. This is some kind of phosphorescence. If the hag is near enough, the light is seen as a transparent mist through which the features and shape of the hag are visible. Before I continue reading, let me just show you the illustration. The astral body departing after death as seen in a clairvoyant vision. It is also said to be capable of leaving the physical body during life and travelling independently through walls and ceilings. I didn't do that when I left my body. I just flew around near the top of the ceiling and observed everything, like looking down, like looking into a fish bowl. It was a very interesting, unique experience. Kind of fun too, but I guess it just took extreme exhaustion and kind of an altered ecstatic state for that to manifest. It doesn't happen every time I go dancing, people have heard. I'm sure it was just, a one-off, but having said that, it was pretty interesting. I say so myself, not having had experienced that before while I was consciously awake and aware. This and all subsequent illustrations are from The Projection of the Astral Body by S. Muldoon and H. C. Carrington, published by Ryder, 1929. So you can just see there's the elderly lady here has passed on and family around her, and she's exiting in the form of what appears to be looking like a young girl, which spirits of the deceased often take on the forms of how they looked at their most happiest time of their life or in their prime. Sometimes they'll appear in their 30s or 40s, but sometimes they'll appear as children even, or very young people. Depends when they were happiest in their life and how they felt about their own being at that point in time. I know my father-in-law of blessed memory, Harry Herschel Aronchik, used to appear to my mother-in-law after his death as a young man demanding sex. Cheeky little bugger that he was. And my mother-in-law was getting quite perturbed. I said, "What do you tell her, Mum?" She says, "No," and her dimples be all deep and embarrassed. I was like, good decision, right thing to say. Hashtag consent, even with spirits. Last thing you need is an incubi on your hands. By the gods. But anyway, he haunted the home for quite some time, actually. It was about a year before he finally stopped being present in the family home, which I found fascinating, actually. Very fascinating. I continue reading. It's not me, it's my double. Dr. Francis Lefebvre, who at the time had been practicing yoga breathing exercises for about 7 years, describes an occasion when his astral body became visible. During World War II, he was the doctor at a prisoner of war camp near Galma in Algeria. His ideas were well known in the officers' mess, and he was the butt of many jokes. As you are when you're surrounded by unbelievers, little do they know, babies. Anyway, one morning, Lefebvre was told to go and see the lieutenant. I went to find him. He was in the barber's shop, always the first to chaff me, and fearless under fire. He didn't seem quite happy in my presence. This is more or less the story he gave me. Last night about midnight, having gone to the little station about 3 kilometres from the camp, I suddenly saw you so clearly that there could be no possible mistake. I said to you, "Hello, Lefebvre, what are you doing here at this time of night?" And you replied, "It's not me, it's my double." And then you disappeared, as if by magic. Then I ran all the way to the camp and verified that you were in your room. I questioned the orderlies and the sentries, and they all guaranteed that you hadn't gone out during the night. The lieutenant, who seemed very impressed, did not make fun of me any more, as investigation proved that he was not in the least drunk that day, and that in fact he never was. The rumour spread in Galma that I did strange tricks. Some months later I discovered that the phrase, "It's not me, it's my double," was still famous in the town. Right, there's a little story within a story, so I'll read that before I continue on. People of Earth. Written by Aleister Crowley. Magic in Theory and Practice. Getting into the astral body. The proper method is as follows. Develop the body of light until it is just as real to you as your other body. I'm starting to have that level of intimacy, feeling it re-enter me in the morning when I'm just waking up. Very trippy experience. Ultimately, the relation of that body with your own must be exceedingly intimate. But before this harmonizing takes place, you should begin by a careful differentiation. Wise. The first thing to do, therefore, is to get the body outside your own. I've never done that, actually, astral travel, consciously, like by my own practicing it at will. It's always happened randomly, like during that night during the dance. I think it was the 11th of May 2024 or the 13th of May. Anyway, there's a video up there about it somewhere on my channel. Do not say, "Oh, it's only imagination." The time to test that is later on, when you have secured a fairly clear mental image of such a body. Try to imagine how your own body would look if you were standing in its place. Try to transfer your consciousness to the body of light. Your own body has its eyes shut. Use the eyes of the body of light to describe the objects in the room behind you. As soon as you feel more or less at home in the fine body, let it rise in the air. Keep on feeling the sense of rising. Keep on looking about you as you rise until you see landscapes or beings of the astral plane. Such have a quality all their own. It's just my friend Jared. I've been waiting for him to call, actually. I'll just quickly reply to that. Where was I? Such have a quality all their own. They are not like material things. They are not like mental pictures. They seem to lie between the two. Now, however unsuccessful your getting out of the body may apparently have been, it is most necessary to use every effort to bring it properly back. Make the body of light coincide in space with the physical body, then recover the unity of consciousness. If you fail to do this properly, you may find yourself in serious trouble. Your body of light may wander away uncontrolled and be attacked and obsessed. You will become aware of this through the occurrence of headache, bad dreams, or even more serious signs such as hysteria, fainting fits, possibly madness, or paralysis. Even the worst of these attacks will probably wear off, but it may leave you permanently damaged to a greater or less extent. That's a very fair warning, isn't it? But I don't leave and like I said, what happened yesterday morning, it was not a conscious astral travelling event. It was just I was feeling myself slipping back into my body and asked my astral body what actually it was doing, as you do, because I'm curious by nature. I want to know what's going on, especially with my own self. Anyway, let us continue reading. As far as I know, there's no madness and no paralysis and no hysteria or fainting fits, but I did used to have hysterical conversions in 2009, and that was a problem. I did have paralysis 2018 too, quite a bit of paralysis in my left leg. I think that was all brought on by the tick bites. I had Lyme-like disease, which they refused to acknowledge here in Australia, but I'm fairly certain a lot of those symptoms were caused by Lyme disease. So, proving that that's what it is, I can't, since they refuse to test properly for things, but that has severely damaged me, I'm certain, including affecting my gut as well. Anyway, on we go and on we go, people of Earth. How does the song go? Ooh, 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 staying alive, staying alive. It's a work in progress. The sensation of astral travel. From accounts given by people who have travelled astrally, the general sensation is at first indistinguishable from the ordinary physical waking state, except sometimes for a feeling of well-being and buoyancy. Dr. Lefebvre cites instances where he found himself walking round his bedroom and could not tell whether he was sleepwalking in his normal body or travelling in his astral body until he felt himself floating upwards. He compares the limbs of the double to the phantom limbs felt by an amputee. He describes using his phantom arms to lever up the top half of his phantom body, but he adds that the most satisfactory results followed when he withdrew upwards from feet to head, like drawing a sword from its sheath. To project himself astrally, Dr. Lefebvre relied on an effort of will, but also used yoga exercises involving more and more extended intervals of suspension of breathing. The most experienced of modern astral travellers, the American author Sylvan Muldoon, attaches importance first to the building into the subconscious of a strong desire to be conscious in the astral body, then to the practice of concentrating on one's image in a mirror. Next, attention is to be centered on the rhythm of the heartbeats and the attempt made to be conscious of the heart beating at any point in the body. Then, by repeated mental suggestion, the heart should be slowed down. I already have quite a slow heart. Any slower, I'll probably die. So I won't be playing with it, I don't think. It's enough that it happens spontaneously. Needless to say, no one with heart weakness or irregularity should use this method, what she said. See, I'm not silly, am I? I know how to survive. Babies. Muldoon's unique series of experiences probably hinged on his abnormally slow heartbeat and his general frail health. He emphasizes that it is the feeling of suspense in the mind, not the actual projection of the astral body, that is unpleasant. He says that a really intense study of and desire for astral projection will always bring results because the force built up in the subconscious will inevitably express itself. Interesting. Apparitions. The evidence points to the possibility that some apparitions or immaterial appearances of persons living or dead are due to the presence of an astral body, which gives me pause for thought. It stopped happening, but a few weeks ago I had a very large man would climb into bed with me and roll over and look at me. Happened for a couple of nights in a row, and I just very calmly lay there and went, "You're not allowed in my sacred space, uninvited, whoever you are." And whoever they were stopped doing it, but it was a bit confronting, let's just put it that way. And I have a fairly good idea who it is or was, and it's a living person. It's a violation of all my spiritual boundaries, by the way, to do such a thing. But I'm making allowance for that fact because they may not be doing that consciously or it will. But anyway, it happened a few nights and then it stopped. And then after that, instead of a human astral body rolling into my bed on the side of the bed where a man would lie, I had a small entity that felt like a bird hopping onto the bed. And yes, that was less confronting because I had a sense that it was a smaller being, but it was a very strange phenomenon too. But bilocation is a real gift, and my mother could do it at will. I don't attempt such things. I think it's a bit frightening and violating to have someone's body, astral body, appear in front of you, almost fully manifested in 3D reality. It's I don't want to do that to people, but I don't think my mother could completely control it, which is why I went to see her when she pulled that stunt with my daughter when we were emptying out the house. I told everyone in the car, so we've got to go and see Gisela and tell her that everything's safe, all her possessions will be carefully curated and looked after by me, and She doesn't need to haunt the house anymore. She can relax that everything's looked after. And indeed, after I went to see her, bear in mind my mother was severely demented by that stage, barely verbal. But when I told her that that's what was happening and that we were going to look after everything for her and she doesn't have to worry anymore, she actually verbalised, I thank you, in her German accent. I thank you, darling. I'm so grateful. I've been so worried. And we all looked at each other because she was not very verbal by that stage already. And Jared said, you made the right choice to come and tell her what's going on. I said, indeed I did. Didn't fancy her haunting us while she's still alive, living at the Moreton Bay Nursing Care Unit in the Advanced Alzheimer's Nursing Care Unit, which was a locked unit, and yet she was manifesting, scaring the bejesus out of my daughter. So she didn't manifest as a fully figured entity, but she was responding to my daughter singing. My daughter heard, after my daughter was singing as she worked, she heard my mother say, oh, that's lovely, darling, keep doing that. So it freaked her right out, understandably so. She rang me and said, don't leave me alone here anymore. Umi's here, Umi's here. I don't know how Umi is here. Umi's not even dead. I went, oh, it's her bilocation. She can't control it. I'll be back soon. So, but yeah, I've never met another person that could do that. And yet this person who I think it was, I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to cast aspersions or frighten people. Don't want them to think I'm being malicious in any way, but it's someone I've loved very much, and I'm just a bit intrigued that that happened. And it's not a manifestation of me wishing and hoping. It was out of left field and a bit of a boundary violation, quite frankly. So I just observed it from an academic perspective and told them, don't pull that stunt again. You need permission to enter my bedroom and my sleeping space. And they vanished and haven't bothered me again. Thank the goddess. But anyway, we continue on. Right. Apparitions. The evidence points to the possibility that some apparitions or immaterial appearances of persons, living or dead, are due to the presence of an astral body. There is the phenomenon of an observed apparition where more than one person, differently situated, sees the figure of an angle appropriate to his position. An example is the case of Lady B and her daughter, who in about 1892 claimed they had seen the ghostly figure of a woman looking at herself in a mirror in their bedroom. Cornell Hart writes of the occurrence in The Enigma of Survival. Lady B saw the figure in quarter profile, the head intercepting its own reflection in the mirror. Miss B saw the back of the figure with its long dark hair. The face was not directly visible to her, but she saw it clearly reflected in the mirror. The record shows that the aspects seen by the two ladies were just as if a physical person had stood there. Envelope of the soul. The idea of an astral body is very old. Ancient Indian writings describe the 8 siddhis, or supernatural powers, which can be acquired through a type of yoga called pranayama. The 6th of these is flying in the sky, apparently referring to what is now called astral projection. E.R. Dodds has shown that the Western idea of the astral body originated in classical Greek philosophy apparently without any important influences from Oriental ideas. In his Laws, Book 10, Plato discusses the souls of the stars which guide them in their courses. Some believe, he says, that these souls have bodies of fire or maybe of air. I think it's plasma he's trying to describe. In addition to the material bodies of the stars, though he also says that the human soul is not visible and enfolds us in a fashion utterly imperceptible to all bodily senses. In the Timaeus, the Creator is said to have made souls which he mounted on the stars, as it were on chariots. These souls were later to be born as men, and if they lived good lives, would return happily to the stars of the life after death. In the life after death, Plato's pupil, Aristotle, developed a theory of pneuma, air or breath, as a constituent of the bodies of men and animals in which the sensitive soul resides and which is analogous to that element of which the stars are made. The linking together of the starry soul chariots, the fiery or airy bodies of the souls of stars, and the Aristotelian starry soul container produced the idea of the astral body as a starry envelope of the soul. The theory was taken up by the Neoplatonist philosophers. Porphyry, for instance, in the 3rd century AD, said that as the soul descends from heaven to earth, where it will acquire a physical body, its pneuma gradually thickens and darkens as it absorbs moisture from the air until it can be seen visibly. After death, the soul's efforts to climb back up to heaven again are hampered by this moist envelope to such an extent that it may even be carried downwards to a place of punishment. If it succeeds in rising, it gradually sheds the envelope. Some disembodied spirits have a misty pneuma which takes any shape they care to imagine, so that they appear to us in different guises, as gods perhaps, or as souls of the dead. The notion of the astral body has a continuous history in the West from classical times on. Dante's Purgatorio, Canto 25, written in the 14th century, says that after death the soul around it beams its own creative power, like to its living form and shape and size. The circumambient air adopts the shape the soul imposes on it. That's interesting. In the 16th century, Agrippa von Nettesheim seems to be referring to astral travel when he talks of vacation of the body, when the spirit is enabled to transcend its bounds and as a light escaped from a lantern to spread over space. The etheric double. The terms astral body and double are used to cover several different types of phenomena. One of them is what is called the etheric double, identical with the Egyptian Ka, K-A. The vital force which gave the body life and which was represented in art as an exact replica of the physical body. The Hindus called it the Linga Sharira, or vital form, which was, so to speak, the body's wiring system. The fact that Sylvain Muldoon placed so much emphasis on the cord which he found linked his projected double to his physical body suggests that his experiences involved the extrusion from the physical body of the etheric double as well as the astral body. Another false trail occurs in the concept of the likeness of a person projected at some point in space by his intense thought or reverie. In Scotland they spoke of the forerunner, meaning some manifestation of a person's presence occurring at his destination before he arrived there. Several of my friends do that. I sense them arriving, usually 5 to 10 minutes before they actually arrive. I'll run to the door and throw the door open, thinking they're already here, and then realise they're not. But then I think they're on their way. They project themselves almost ahead of time. It's actually quite astonishing too. This is different from the conception of an astral body, which contains the full functioning consciousness. The true astral body also applies to the condition of some dream states and to the experience of seeming to be dissociated from one's body during sleep or loss of physical consciousness. The dream cures at the shrines of the Greek god of healing, Asclepios, which apparently affected a ghostly counterpart of the physical body, seem to have been concerned with the etheric double rather than the astral. Fantasy or reality? Of modern authorities, some, like D.J. West and Anthony Flew, maintain an attitude of good-humoured scepticism towards astral bodies and projections. On the other side, Professor Hart's conclusions are noteworthy. He has summarised with great fairness the evidence and contentions of the holders of all points of view, sceptical or convinced, in his The Enigma of Survival. He thinks that these diversities among the different descriptions of the astral world and of the afterlife in general cannot be explained by claiming that all such accounts are mere fantasies. The verified evidence of the reality of astral projection seems quite conclusive, and the evidence that apparitions of the dead may often be, and usually are, vehicles of surviving conscious personalities seems also to be convincing. See also Double Light Out of the Body Experiences, written by C. Nelson Stewart. Further reading: A. Flew, A New Approach to Psychical Research, H. Hart, The Enigma of Survival, D.J. West, Psychical Research Today. For accounts of astral travel, see also 2 books by R. Crookall, The Study and Practice of Astral Projection and the Techniques of Astral Projection. C. Green, Out of Body Experiences. F. Lefebvre, Expérience Initiatique. S. J. Muldoon and H. Carrington, The Projection of the Astral Body. For the Greek Origins and the Neoplatonists, see E. R. Dodds, edited Proclus, The Elements of Theology. Here we have some pictures below the astral body lying in the air above the physical body, to which it is connected by an elastic cord termed in spiritualism as a silver cord. Arrows show the route the phantom takes in projecting. The phantom then stands upright through the push and pull though the push and pull of the cord causes instability in the phantom. Finally, the phantom interiorizes or returns to the physical body. So I'll just quickly show you that. It's all very fascinating. My father was a great practitioner of astral travelling. He did it quite regularly with quite interesting results. What he used to tell me about all of these practices are all very fascinating, spiritual and metaphysical, but didn't make either my father or my mother kinder or more honourable or nicer or more decent people, just saying. But it is what it is, people of Earth. The most famous of modern astral travellers was the American author Sylvan Muldoon. He believed that an intense desire for astral projection would always bring results. Well, it worked for my father anyway, but honestly, I try not to think of those entities, even though they are my biological progenitors and the reasons I'm here on Earth, reading you all these wonderful magical stories. There's a lot of cumulative trauma attached to them also. So there is that. Right, and so thus concludes today's reading of Even Date, 9th of June 2025. Quite tired now, not feeling all that well, got a little mild bit of nausea as well. Hope I haven't caught a horrible bug. It's probably just some reaction to something I ate. Been eating naughty things, like whole packets of those healthy kind of chippies. Probably weren't that healthy. And the chemicals they throw into things. Something's made me feel a bit off anyway. But having said that, I read you stories and I hope you enjoyed it, and we're cooking on gas and, quite happy and contented today in spite of my gut issues. Sometimes they give me a weird sense of euphoria. Trying not to die can be a difficult and long drawn out process. In my case, it's taken fucking 60 years, but I'm always, as you know if you follow this channel, dreaming of my happy ever after with my true loving partner, better health and prosperity, and it's kind of comical when you think about it. So it can swing either way in the space-time continuum, or according to my moods, or according to the capricious whims of the gods. Babies. Anyway, wherever you are, if you're watching my videos in the space-time continuum on planet Earth, do not visit me in your astral body in my boudoir, because it's not kosher and it's not welcomed. Just saying. And just live your best life, and if you wish to communicate with me, there's a wonderful invention. It's called a mobile phone, where you could turn up in person, your physical body with your mind and spirit fully integrated, and have a nice jolly conversation with me, salubriously and courteously in person. But no bilocating is going to be tolerated more than twice. Anyway, you kind of have to giggle about that. But whoever that was, who I have a fairly good idea, blessed be on your journey with your new lady love, your new existence, and peace out. Shalom. Bye for now.